Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Purchasing Insight webinar, Controlling Spend Without Choking Off Growth. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Burke Hill from Inside Sales. Hello, Burke.
Hello, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good, thanks. We've got a really good turnout today. A really great response to this webinar. So I think it's a topic where there's a lot of interest, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time out to join this conversation. We've got some really good content to go through, and we will have time for questions at the end. But please, everybody, don't wait till the end for questions. You can type your questions in the panel near the bottom, and we'll get to those questions at the end, and we'll try and answer as many as we can. So without further ado, I would just like to say a number of things based on my experience of implementing purchase to pay, and it's really about the challenge of getting buy-in. Often, we have to face it, purchase to pay is often seen as boring back office stuff. It's not as exciting as marketing and sales and all of this kind of stuff, and it's often not in the spotlight. And in order to sell effectively a business case, that has to successfully compete with other much more attractive opportunities. It can be a very difficult business case to sell, even when it appears to be financially compelling. And that's often because top line beats bottom line every time. Most companies value sales and growth and revenue much more than they do cost control and things like that. At least that was certainly true a number of years ago. I clearly remember in the late 90s, right at the peak of the dot-com boom, I was working with a technology company, a very large global technology company that everyone will have heard of, and we faced this real problem, trying to persuade them that controls put in place around purchase to pay were important. But this company was only interested in growth. It was growing very rapidly in a very, very competitive environment, and they knew that there was a lack of controls. They knew that there was money leaving the business because of poor practice, but they actually didn't care. Growth was much more important, and this took second place. And I wonder whether that is still true in the 21st century. Is it true that back office takes a back seat? I think it's probably true to say that the business case for purchase to pay is now more compelling. It actually costs less significantly less to implement enterprise applications now. It's a lot quicker. There's a faster speed to implement and faster speed to benefit. We've got technologies like cloud, which make it very easy to implement, in contrast to on-premise approaches. And of course, suppliers are much more ready compared to, say, 10, 20 years ago. Suppliers are much more ready to embrace purchase to pay. So how in 2016 do we implement purchase to pay in a very fast-moving environment? And this is where Burke comes in. I think your experience, Burke, is very much about implementing in a fast-moving environment. I think I'm really interested to hear your experience. Before I hand over to you, would you mind just, for everyone's benefit, explaining a little bit about Inside Sales?
Certainly. Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Burke Hill. I'm the Senior Director of Procurement and Facilities at InsideSales.com. Just a little bit about InsideSales.com. We consider ourselves the leader in sales acceleration technology or software. And one of the key premises is that we kind of locked into early on as a company is that we believe that science is the key to unlocking human potential. And so as a company, we've developed this sales automation platform where we collect sales transaction data, and we use that data to help predict for our customers a better transaction or engagement in the future. And so we use predictive data to help them improve their sales. Kind of our mantra is that we help our customers sell more. And we've had really good growth in the last few years. This company started about 10 years ago as a small little startup in Provo, Utah. And it's been rapidly growing over the last few years. In fact, the last 2 years we've had 166% growth as a company. Inside Sales was recently named a Forbes Cloud 100 company, and we just recently got named to the CNBC Disruptor 50 list, so we feel really proud about the work we're doing, the efforts in really kind of creating a new market for the sales organizations to improve their sales. So go ahead and move on to the next slide. So what I wanted to do today is just kind of talk a little bit about what I walked into when I started in Inside Sales about 2 years ago. I started in January of 2015. We affectionately call the time that I walked in the junk show because everything was manual. So there was a small company that had grown quite rapidly, and all of their processes were paper-based. There were no systems to kind of manage the procurement process. There was no workflow. You would actually fill out a manual requisition form, walk it around, get a few bosses to sign off on it, and off you'd go and go purchase. So spend was not controlled at all. People were off in their own corners making decisions, committing the company to spend, and a lot of these people had very limited or no expertise in procurement practices or in the best way to source and negotiate for items. And just a lot of challenges around just, just trying to keep things under control. Most of the spend we would consider today as maverick spend, people just off and buying. Oftentimes the accounting folks would get an invoice without any knowledge of the agreement in place. And so people were just wasting a lot of money as a company. One thing I'd like to mention, though, is that when I walked into the company, I did feel or sense a strong desire by our executive team to do the right thing. I mean, they realized that we were living the junk show and we needed to go do something different. And so I did have the support of my direct boss, the CFO, in helping try and make changes within the company. So if we move on to the next slide, one of the things that we started looking at early on as we were trying to make this transformation is what % of our spend was on a PO or under contract. And this was kind of a loosely created measurement because we didn't have very good ways of collecting the data, but you can see that when we kind of started in that October through January, kind of even into April, May timeframe, we were measuring 20 to 50% of our spend being managed by some form of PO or contract or commitment.
I guess these are interesting figures, Burke. I guess even these must be quite optimistic, mustn't they? Because certainly in my experience, if POs aren't in place generally, or there aren't policies properly embedded, there's a great deal of spend which is just simply invisible that you just never get to know about. Was that the case for you?
Yeah, definitely. And it was, this is definitely something that was hard to track because we didn't have a system to track it. So this was all kind of manual efforts by our accounts payable people to try and associate an invoice with some form of a contract or a paper requisition that was signed. So it was, you're correct, this was very optimistic. It was a mess. So I kind of early on, try to figure out how do I make this case to the CFO that things need to change. And luckily, as I mentioned before, the CFO was pretty aligned with me in terms of what we thought needed to be done. In fact, when I interviewed for the job, I said, look, if we're going to come in here and actually prepare this company for growth, and if we're going to prepare this company to scale, you have to have systems in place. And so I put together a vision document, and this is kind of a highlight list of the things that we talked about. This is my vision document for the first year. One thing that we focused on was let's go ahead and let's at least get our processes, these manual processes, under some form of documentation. Let's make sure that we're all following these manual processes the best we can. So we did a lot of work implementing processes, and then also working to develop specific core policies that would control those processes. Things like PO approval policy, who has the authorization to approve a request, and also things like expense management policies and things like that. So we worked a lot, and this is my vision, is to put these kind of policies and processes in place, and then as a result of that, we would then go off and start working on developing source-to-pay software. Pete, did you have a question?
Hi, Burke. That's I mean that's a really good point that you make there. Often when we look at purchase-to-pay implementations, we're thinking about the technology, aren't we? But actually, the technology just enables all of those core policies and processes, doesn't it? So I guess I'm guessing here your experience was having to start with that kind of change management, that non-technical process of defining what is good practice and communicating that.
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of felt that was critical to making this thing work long term, is let's get in there, let's go create a process, manually kind of flow chart it out. Let's put our core policies in place so that we have some measure of control in place prior to even implementing a procurement system. And I think that was critical for us to kind of get our heads around that, get the executive buy-in, and focus on getting those things in place before we put a software system in place. So the other key pieces to our vision were to select a SaaS-based source-to-pay software. We really did not want an on-premise solution. We wanted a SaaS-based solution to make it easier for us. Other things that we talked about were in that first year we would have to configure this software. We would need to connect it to our accounting software. And then out of that, we'd also go focus then on developing what our core categories were within our spend management program, and figure out who our core suppliers were. We talked about hiring some category managers to focus on the core categories. And then ultimately in that first year, we talked about that we would need to implement that P2P software company-wide. And our thought was that if we implemented a P2P software, we can now collect data. We can now have all of our spend coming through one place. We would be able to then analyze that spend, analyze our suppliers, and develop category strategies around that. So I showed them this slide, and this slide just kind of describes kind of the two things that I thought we needed as a company. There's two pieces to the procurement process that I feel are vital. One is the buying side, which is, I guess if you were to look at this, the buying side would be the P2P, it would be the procure-to-pay system. It allows our users to identify what they want, route those requests through approvals, go do your 3 bids and a buy, and create a purchase order, kind of manage that process all the way through to payment. So that's kind of the tactical procurement back office, as you referred to, P2P system. And then there's this other piece that I think is equally as vital, is the sourcing process, and that's why I had recommended to the CFO that we have category managers in place, because these are the people that are going to actually go help us, analyze the spend, figure out, what sources we're going to go use, kind of negotiate, do sourcing events, and negotiate contracts. And all of that work would actually feed in to the buying side, the procure-to-pay side. And so just tried to explain to the CFO these are two core pieces of an effective procurement organization in a fast-moving company. So one of the things that we did when we started looking at a P2P sourcing event, when we started looking for a P2P provider, we looked kind of primarily at the Gartner reports, the Magic Quadrant reports, and the Forrester Wave reports to get an idea who are the kind of leaders in SaaS-based P2P software solutions. In our efforts, we actually went out and looked at Ariba, Coupa, SciQuest, and Zycus as kind of the suppliers that we felt like had the capabilities to support what we were looking for. And on the next slide, I kind of wanted to walk you through the kind of the key criteria that we used when we were evaluating these different sources. So as we were selecting a P2P software solution, kind of the core things we looked for were first and foremost was ease of use. We needed a system that was going to be easy to use for our suppliers, for anybody who's actually requesting or buying in the system, for our buyers and category managers, for our accounts payable team, for the approvers within the system, and then also those in the backside administering the software. And so that was a critical kind of focus we had. We actually put some fairly high scoring measures in place to look at that. We also looked for a system that had catalog capability, the ability to punch out to other sources of supply, the ability to create internal catalogs within the system itself, but just a way for our requesters, our end users, to be able to go in, find what they want easily, and then request it quickly so that we could get their needs met quickly as well. The workflow had to work really well, so they had to have good approval workflow through the process. It had to flow easily from one kind of user to the next. We also looked at, workflows for both procure to pay, and we also looked at sourcing workflows as well. The system had to have good metrics and reporting. It had to have good ease of implementation. Supplier enablement had to be simple. Security had to be right. It had to meet all of the various data security measures that are required now these days. And then international functionality. We needed this system to be able to work in at least the US and the UK with the potential to move into Asia Pacific and other regions. So those were kind of the criteria that we looked at. We ultimately settled on Coupa as our provider for P2P, and they've been a very good partner in this process as we've moved along down this vision that I've had. Next slide. So just, kind of talking through some successes that we've had to date since we've done this. I guess the one core thing on that vision list, we've almost done everything on that list so far. We're still working on category strategies, but everything else we've done. One of the core successes we've had is that we went from very low spend on PO or contract. We actually have been able to increase that to 100%. And that's a tall order, and I think the only reason we were able to achieve 100% is that we really worked hard to implement those policies that we discussed earlier. We developed a solid partnership with our finance team and our accounting team, and they were crucial to kind of helping us back up our policies and make sure that things worked effectively and that people were actually using the system and the process for all of their procurement needs.
That's really interesting. I mean, those two bullet points are very powerful. The spend on PO or contract, 100%. You see that very, very rarely. I often see it in the 90s or even late 90s, but 100% is very impressive. So well done for that. But it's the second point is I think is really crucial. You've mentioned that there's this solid partnership between purchasing and finance, and I think this is one of the most important prerequisites of any purchase-to-pay project. If you haven't got the thinking aligned between purchasing and finance, it's very difficult to progress anywhere, but certainly to get anywhere near 100%. And I think the way I see this is, there are two P's in P2P. There's purchasing and there's payment, and they're just as important as each other. And it's strange, but purchasing people, if you ask purchasing people what they think purchase to pay is, and you ask finance people what they think purchase to pay is, they'll often give very different answers. So getting that thinking aligned, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and it's been a good partnership. We've from all the finance team and all the way up through to the CEO. So our CEO is a strong believer in what we're doing here. And we early on, another thing we implemented as a policy. It's a unique policy, but it's one that really drove this percentage to 100%. And that was a no PO, no pay policy. So if any invoice came into accounts payable that did not have a backing contract or PO, we didn't pay the bill. And we pushed it back on the end user that actually went off and did that maverick spend. And that actually probably was the one of the core kind of backing each other up things that we did that made sure that everything was coming through the process. As a result of kind of these efforts, we've already seen kind of, and really this is kind of, maybe this is, easy stuff, stuff that was low-hanging fruit. But we've been able to achieve about a 25% savings just by moving all the maverick spend back under management. Our requisition to PO cycle time has reduced dramatically. You can only imagine how hard it was to walk paper requisitions around and try and keep track of them and get that done. And then we do have these core policies that we have in full force. PO approval process, or the approvals, the contract signature policy, how we interact with our suppliers, and then we've also, you don't think of T&E as a big spend, but it's huge, and so we've got a lot of controls around our travel and entertainment spend and how we use our credit cards, so that those are controlled properly as well. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to have now 2 category managers that work with me and basically support our customers. We've divided up our organizations. As a software company, we don't focus on, obviously, manufacturing, but our focus is on all the indirect spend with sales and marketing, all the IT spend, all the admin spend. And so these guys have kind of split up their responsibilities between the different departments within the company, and they're doing a great job partnering with their customers to help them get their sourcing projects completed. And I think, and then finally, just here's just a chart. This kind of shows you, once we launched our P2P system with Coupa, we were kind of hitting around a 66% rate in terms of payments on PO. But quickly, we were rapidly, by using this system, get up to 100%, and we've been able to maintain that even till today. I think this chart shows through May, but even through September of this year, we're still maintaining 100% payments with PO.
This is a really interesting chart. I think for me, this illustrates the point I was referring to a little bit earlier about a key component of a successful project is the non-technology stuff. And you can see that even before the P2P launch, which I guess is the implementation of Coupa, you're seeing a significant increase in compliance and in good behavior. But it seems that the technology is it's more than the icing on the cake, really. It's taking you from okay performance to world-class performance.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do with brute force, and that's kind of what that 66% represents. It's just brute force, and managers really trying to stay on top of things. But without a system in place that really controls it all the way, it would have been impossible to achieve 100% for sure.
Okay.
So that's kind of my experience that we've had.
Actually, before we've had quite a few questions actually from attendees. One question that's come up several times, by the way, is will the slide deck be available? And yeah, absolutely yes. So after after today, we'll be able to send you all a recording of this session, but also the slide deck. But before we go on to some of those other questions, I have a question, and this is really based on my experience going back a few years now, where having some challenges in getting support at a senior executive level. So how did you go about persuading C-level executives to buy into purchase to pay?
Well, it wasn't difficult with the CFO, because I think we aligned early on, all the way from the beginning with my interview process, and kind of talking about the vision of what we wanted to try and accomplish within the company. So me and the CFO were very aligned, but it did take some effort to go work with some of the other executives in the sales and the IT and other groups. Our focus was, let's get the CFO and the CEO aligned, and then we can go work on getting the chief marketing officer, the chief technology officer, the chief, sales officer aligned as well. And that was my focus was, let's get the CEO aligned first, and then let's go after the rest of the group and get their support and buy-in. It's really easy once you kind of show these guys how much more efficient they can be as a company, with these automation pieces in place, and how much money they can save. And so we really kind of used efficiency and just sheer cost reduction, that we could actually contribute fairly heavily to the bottom line by kind of working through this system and using the processes.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a really important point, isn't it? Once you've got buy-in from the very top, in fact, without buy-in from the very top, it's very difficult to get past that maverick marketing director, for example, or some of the characters that feel that their job doesn't really fit into compliant purchase to pay. So I think that top-down approach is really important. I'm going to try and stick to as near to 30 minutes for this as possible, so I want to move straight on to one of the questions we've got. How long did it take to implement Coupa from selection to go live?
Yeah, that's a good question. We did our sourcing process starting in the kind of May timeframe of 2015. We selected Coupa by end of June and started the implementation in August. And so from August until the end of September, it took us about 4 to 6 weeks to completely implement Coupa, get it up and running, and off we go. We kind of had the luxury of not having an existing system. So I did that purposefully, not trying to implement any other kind of automated processes when I first joined, so that we could just quickly adopt a solution that worked for us. And so we were able to take advantage of Coupa's. They have kind of a fast start program where you can just quickly connect it into your accounting system, and it was easy enough to use that we were able to train our users within days, and we were off and running. So basically mid-August through end of September, and we were live.
Burke, we didn't rehearse that question, so I didn't know what you were going to say. So, but you did say 4 to 6 weeks.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
I mean, I made the point of this earlier about the world has changed in the last 15, 20 years. That would have been unheard of at 15, 20 years ago. Completely unheard of, and I think this is the benefit of these kinds of technologies, especially cloud technologies.
Yeah, I think that the hardest part of the whole process there was just connecting Coupa to your accounting system. And it's a standalone, Coupa was a standalone, it's a SaaS-based software. Once it's connected, you just start going in and using the system, and off you go. So most of that 4 to 6 weeks was just making those connections, and then just getting our end users trained and making sure that we understood, how to use the system as a buying team and accounts payable team, and it went really fast.
There's a good link in what you've said there to another question that's been asked about user experience. What sort of feedback have you had from the user community?
Yeah, I've had nothing but good response from our team. They're very happy. They like the tool. One of the things we did really quickly is we tried to make access to things that are easy to source readily available. So we actually did a connection with Amazon for Business, and that was really fast and painless. We connected Amazon for Business, so our customers have access to all of Amazon's, millions of, options in that marketplace. And so we connected that quickly so that people could go in and find the little things that they need and kind of help them solve some of their problems fast. We found that everybody's happy they don't have to do paper, and really by putting the system in, we've sped up the procurement process. We've made things move faster. The company actually, I think, can grow faster now that we've got these systems in place and that they're using them.
Great. I want to just go through a few questions that are probably fairly easy to answer. Sophie Wallace has asked, how big is inside sales in terms of number of employees?
So our company has around 650 employees today. So we're kind of a mid-size company. Certainly not a big enterprise at this point. We're still growing, but there's 650 employees.
And another question from Kelly Borum: how many vendors, suppliers approximately do inside sales have?
As we've looked through the data, now that I actually have data, we have about 200 suppliers that make up 95% of our spend, but we have a very long tail. We probably have close to 2,000 suppliers in our system.
Okay. Let me think. One more question. I've got here, what was the single most distinct differentiator for choosing Coupa, and how did you align that to your business case?
I think the most distinct thing, because many of these companies have really good systems, there were a couple of things we liked a lot about Coupa. One was how easy it was to connect into our ERP system, our accounting system. And then also we love the ability within Coupa to not have to have our suppliers be a part of a network if they didn't want to be. Their system has the ability to email the PO to the supplier. The supplier can actually create an invoice right off of that emailed PO and accept and acknowledge the PO right off of an email. And so just the ability to kind of make it simple for the suppliers to receive their POs, respond to their POs. In general, the workflow is very simple. Even through the approvals, you can just approve a requisition on an email. You don't have to go into a system to approve. So that ease of use, like I talked about earlier, was critical, and that was probably the biggest differentiator we saw out there for that.
Okay. Well, Burke, that's been absolutely fantastic. We're overrunning a little bit, and there's lots more questions we could go through, but I will commit to making sure that all of those questions that we haven't had time to address get answered. Thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to attend. I think that's been a really good session, so thank you very much, Burke. You will all receive a link to a recording of this session, so certainly for those who were unable to attend but registered, they'll be able to see it, and you'll also receive the slide deck. So thank you all again, and see you next time.